Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to do lesson 9.2.1, amplitude changes and vertical shifts. So we're going to add in to sine and cosine. If you've already seen the rest of this resource page, you might notice that there's going to be some graphing. So let's get started. Let's jump right into it. So transformations of y equals sine of x and y equals cosine of x. Graphing sine and cosine with amplitude changes and vertical shifts. It also says it there. Well, so y equals sine of x and y equals cosine of x are going to be our parent graphs. If you remember that from the weeks that we've been learning about different kinds of parent graphs, the absolute functions, quadratic functions, exponential functions, and even logarithmic functions. That was towards the end. But you guys have seen parent graphs. So let's jump into the definitions. Periodic function repeats a pattern of y values at regular intervals. So this is just both of these are periodic functions. Basically states that they repeats a pattern of y values at regular intervals. So regular, you could say equal intervals, and I don't know how to explain it without a visual. So if we look down here, you could see that it repeats this part repeats in between my fingers, and that part of the graph repeats that pattern of y values. It repeats it here, and you could pretty much assume it's going to repeat off the page as well. So that's what it's saying. That's why y equals sine of x and y equals cosine of x are periodic functions. Let's go back up. Let's finish our definitions. Period. The horizontal length of one cycle. Remember, my fingers showed what one cycle was. This is a period. This is one cycle. It goes up and then down. It goes up through the x-axis and then back up through here. That's one period. And the most important part about a period is its length. It's usually going to be from 2 pi in length. And we do it in radians because if we did it if we put 1, 2, 3, 4, it wouldn't give us such a clean graph. But regular intervals of radians will give us this graph. And you can only graph sine of x and y equals cosine of x in radians. I want you guys to remember that. So, what was I saying? I keep getting distracted because I think of new information. So, we have one period right here, and I said it was 2 pi in length, because 0 to negative 2 pi, that's still 2 pi in length. Or, if we go in the positive direction, that's still 0 to 2 pi. So 2 pi in length, so 360 degrees. And that is one period. The amplitude is half the difference between the maximum and minimum. Oh man, handwriting, man, minimum values of the function. So the height, that's what it's saying, the maximum height and the minimum height of the function. So we can say that the absolute value of the amplitude will equal the maximum, capital M, minus the minimum, lowercase m, all over 2, because half the difference. Remember, definition, we can make it into a function very easily. And as you can tell, this would be my maximum, this would be my minimum. So 1 would be my maximum, and negative 1 would be my minimum. All right. Sorry if I'm moving slowly. I'm just trying to make sure everything's in frame. So, the domain. What's the domain? Right. Goes on to infinity. I already gave it to you guys earlier. You guys are like, but you already gave it to us. I remember. Chill. All right, what's the range? So we have 1 to -1, or -1 to 1, since we have to go in order, right? So we write it in the same way. Am I gonna have open or closed brackets? Closed, right? Because it includes that value. You can't include infinity because infinity goes on forever. So -1 and 1. What's the period? Period is 2 pi or 360 degrees. I explained that. You guys should have been telling me that before I told you guys. So what do we need to find the amplitude? Max, which equals 1. The min, which equals -1. And then if we put it into the formula, we'll get 1 minus -1 over 2, which equals 2 over 2, which gives us 1. And that would be the graph over there. And it fits all of these requirements, right? Domain, infinite, range, -1 to 1, period's 2 pi, yep, I already showed you guys that, and the amplitude is 1, because it's half the difference between the maximum and minimum, which is 1, right? Halfway is 1. Good. 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 Yeah, I opened the window. It's a hot day. You can hear those cars. A lot of people like to straight race down my street, so you might be hearing some of that every now and again. Hopefully not. Hopefully. I can't promise anything. All right, let's do this one. Domain. X is the, yep, -infinity to infinity. Yep, it's most of the time it's going to be -infinity to infinity. The only one that you really have to pay attention to will be the range. And the range for the cosine graph is, you guessed it, -1. Give me a sec. -1, 1, period, 2 pi, or 360 degrees. And the amplitude is going to be 1 as well. I did the math up there. Because the max equals 1 and the min also equals 1. Check the math up there. All right, so let's look at both of the functions. For the y equals sine of x graph, when you look at the origin or the center, there is no origin, the center of the function, it crosses through the center. It crosses through 0, 0. But when you look at y equals cosine, it doesn't cross through the origin. It starts, it hits 1. It starts at 1, and then it hits half pi on both ends. Hits the x-axis on half pi from both ends. So this kind of shows you that the cosine graph could either be shifted to the left or right, considering how you look at the sine graph. Right? I just want you guys to be aware of some of the characteristics of a cosine graph and be aware of the characteristics of a sine graph. All right. Let's go ahead and do the second page. The worst parts. All right. Okay, so let's do this. So now we're introducing A and K, right? So what is A? A, the absolute value of A will either stretch or shrink the graph vertically. So it's gonna be not necessarily a stretch factor, because stretch factor does it horizontally. No, it does it vertically as well. Never mind. So it can be seen as a stretch factor from something that you guys have previously figured out. So it's either going to shrink the graph like that, or make it bigger like that. Hopefully you guys understood when I used my hands. If you didn't, ask me questions. Don't stay quiet. So A tells us how high and how, yep, you guessed it, low to go on the graph. That's what A is going to tell us. That's all you. So vertical shift, K vertically shifted. K translates the graph K units vertically. So I'll shift the entire graph up 2, down 2, depending if it's plus or minus. K tells us where the middle, right? Middle is a good word. Middle of the graph should be. New zero line or center line, right? It's not technically the origin because it starts from negative infinity or positive infinity, but it can be called a center line or a zero line. And K gives you that new center or a zero line. All right, let's do this. Give the amplitude and vertical shift of each. So you get amplitude 3, and then the vertical shift is up 1. How did I do that? So A is positive 3, so it has a vertical shift. What is it, stretch or shrink? It stretches, and that looks like up L. I'll move the one a little bit further, up 1. And the vertical shift, right, plus K, plus 1. So it goes up 1. All right, do B. Amplitude is gonna be 1/2. Vertical shift of down 3.5. Right? You guys know this. You've done it before. Oh, now you're just doing the sine and cosine. So amplitude is going to be 5. Remember, it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. If it's negative, what is it going to do? Right, it's going to shrink your graph. No, what is negative? No, it's not going to shrink your graph. Negative is going to flip your graph. Remember, that's what the negative sign does out in front. It's going to flip it across the y-axis. If it's 5, it's going to stretch it. If it's going to be less than 1, it's going to shrink it. Some of you guys probably figured out I made that mistake early on. Sorry. I'm correcting myself now. So 5, anything greater than 1, it's going to stretch. Anything less than 1, it's going to shrink it. You guys were right. So vertical shift, it's going to be down 2. Okay, amplitude 1. So no stretch or shrink. It's going to stay the same. But there's a negative, so it's going to flip it one way or the other. Vertical, it's going to flip it across the y-axis. So then the vertical shift is going to be up 4. Right. So let us draw. Let us graph the first one. First, let's answer the questions before we graph it. Amplitude 1. Vertical shift up 2. Oh no, what is the middle? Middle is going to y equal k, because that's going to K is going to give us our new middle or center line. Remember that. So y equals 2. What's my max? K plus a. So what's 2 plus 1? Right. 3. 3 is our new max. What's our new min? K minus a. Yep. Which is gonna, whoops, I didn't write 3. 3. K minus a, it's gonna be 1. All right, let's graph it. All right, let's graph my center line first. Up. 1, 2. All right, remember how it goes. Since my max is 3, pi over 2 is going to be 3, but then it's going to go back down at pi, back down to 2, and then it's going to come back at 3 pi over 2, down to 1. So we're going to use these y equals 2, y equals 3, and y equals 1 as our areas. It's going to be in between these three, our sine graph. So then at 2 pi, it's going to go back up to 2. You guessed it. Well, you didn't guess, you knew it. So let's do left side. Negative pi over 2, move down to 1. Negative pi, back up to 2. Negative 3 pi over 2, it's going to be up to 3. And then negative 2 pi, back down to 2. All right, so then I'm gonna draw it. Really, really ugly drawing. And gonna come back up. And that's it. That's our new one. All right, let me draw my parent graph on here to show you guys all the shifters. All right, so here we go. Gonna come back, gonna do that. Gonna come back through here. Gonna come back up, hit 0. Gonna come back through there. Gonna hit that at 0. Gonna come back up, and then end at 2 pi. So hopefully you guys can see my dotted lines on the video. I really hope I made them dark enough. So you could see that it shifted up too, but that was the only shift of the graph. We found the max and min using K because K shifted up the max and min as well. All right, let's move on. Are you guys ready? Are you ready? All right, let's go. So, what is the amplitude? 2. What is the vertical shift? There isn't. None. Yay! What's the middle? Y equals K. If there's none, Y equals 0. What's my new max? 0 plus 2, which equals 2. What's my new min? 0 minus 2, which equals -2. So, I'm going to write those in. Y equals 0, that's going to be my center line. Y equals 2 is going to be my max. And Y equals -2 is going to be my min. Alrighty, so now my sine graph is flipped because of negative. So my max isn't going to be, it's not going to start. Alright, here's my center line. If I'm going through pi over 2, I'm going to have to go down. So I'm going to have to go down right there. I can't start by going up, right? Then I got to come back up and hit pi at 0 because I have a K value of 2, right? And then at 3 pi over 2, I'm going to hit 2. Come back up, hit 2. And then what do you think is going to happen over there? Yep, I'm going to hit it down at 0. All right, let's do the other side. So now I'm going to get my max on the other side. Up, hit it down at 0. Come back down at -2. Come back up at 0. So you see how it did 2 things to the sine graphs. Let me draw the regular sine graph, or I'm not going to do that. So right, you see the sine graph right there? And then if I remove it, you see how the center starts going up in the positive direction, but here it starts going down in the positive direction. So it flips it across the y-axis, or it could have flipped it across the x-axis. It's the same thing. Since we'll be doing flips across x-axis, I should have said x-axis flip. So flips across the x-axis. I'm gonna stay uniform. So flips it across the x-axis. No, flips it across the y-axis. No, for sine and cosine, it does flip it across the y-axis. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. It flips it across the y-axis. And I want you guys to see how it does that. All right, if you have any questions, we will talk about it when you guys see me. All right, let's do the next one. Amplitude is gonna be 1/2. Vertical shift is gonna be none again. Middle, y equals k, which equals y equals 0. Max is going to be 0 plus 1/2, which gives us 1/2. Min is going to be 0 minus 1/2, which equals -1/2. So you can already tell that it's going to be shrunk because it's less than 1, right? So let's start at, well, cosine. Am I going to start here at 0, 0? No. So y equals 0 is 1, but then I have another part right here at y equals 1/2. And then I have another part at y equals -1/2. So it's going to be really small shrunk graph between 1/2 and -1/2. So I'm going to start at +1/2 because cosine, its center line, is at 0 1/2. It's going to be its center line starts on the maximum. It's going to be, then it's going to hit the 0, then come back down at pi at 1/2, right? Then it's going to come back and hit 0 at 3, if I hit that correctly. God. And then it's going to come back and hit there. Let me redo that. I don't like that. Right? Doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to show me that it's gonna be in there. All right, then it's gonna come back, hit there, come back, hit that, come back, hit 0, come back and hit 1/2. Just like that. And we know that the regular cosine graph is going to hit 1. It's going to be between 1 and -1. If you look at the first page, and you can see that. Compare them and look at those key differences. What did 1/2 do? It shrunk it. Right? And no reflection. Oh, and if we get a negative cosine, is it going to change the graph? No. It only does that with sine. All right, let's do the last one. You guys are thinking, finally, we're on the last one. I don't have to hear him anymore. But some of you guys will never hear my voice because you guys aren't watching these. All right, so amplitude is 1. Vertical shift is down 1 because it's -1. The middle, y equals k. K is -1, y equals -1. Max is 0. And the min is -2. I feel like I need to show you guys how to do that, but I feel like you understand that it's k plus a, k minus a, right? K plus a, k minus a. So -1 plus 1 gives you 0, -1 minus 1 gives you -2. So we're going to have y equals 0. So therefore, our new middle center is going to be y equals -1, and then y equals -2. Right? So we're going to start at 0, 0, surprisingly, because that's our max. We're going to start our max on this y-axis. And then it's going to hit in the positive direction. It's going to go down to -1. And then when I hit pi, it's going to go down to -2, come back up, hit -1, and then it's going to continue. Wow, I made that too steep. And it's going to come back and hit 2 pi at 0. Well, what do you think the left side's going to do? It's going to come, hit at 1, continue, go down to 0, -2, and then it's going to come back, hit -1, and then it's gonna level out and wait for its time to come back around at -2 pi, which is 0, which its max height is at 0. Right? So, if you have any questions, we will see each other. Ask me any questions. Don't hesitate. Don't be shy. This can get tough. And I'll see you in the next video.